Something big just happened today with the tariffs and a Supreme Court decision on them. First, I want to introduce myself. I am the ex-pharmacist. I've been inside the medical industry my entire life, in retail, hospital, research, government, as both a drug, device, and cosmetic regulator, and a health fraud investigator. Suffice to say that I've seen a lot of corruption at all levels, and I'll just stop there. I have chosen to remain anonymous for the past 2.5 years for the security of myself and my family, but plan on coming out after X-Pharmacon in April, so to speak, and will be conducting live podcasts. If you want to know more about some of the cases that I worked, you can go to the About section at xpharmacon.com. Okay, so let me tell you about this decision, which the left is cheering as a huge win. First, let me say that the graphic that you're looking at is a timeline of when tariffs were stopped and income taxes begun. We'll look closer in a bit, but first, let's look at the decision and the judges, because I think we will be cleaning house in SCOTUS as well, so we should notice voting trends. The decision was 6-3 that President Trump exceeded his authority by imposing sweeping tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which allows the president to place import tariffs on nations which pose a threat to the point that it has become an emergency. Here's the rub. The act, signed by sleeper Gerald Ford, was passed without a definition of the very premise of the law, an emergency. Whether this was deliberate or an oversight, few people know, but we watch trends. So, the decision as to whether the President of the United States could make it very expensive to send things into our country, like weapons and drugs, relies on whether these threats are considered an emergency or not, and there's no definition of an emergency as it applies to this law. I have written laws, and I can tell you that defining terms contained within is always the first thing that we did, because this is where gigantic loopholes are created. So I personally find it quite suspicious that the law was left with such ambiguity. In my opinion, it was either deliberate or incompetence, which is hard to believe when a bunch of legislators who are also lawyers wrote it. There's a 170-page decision with each justice's argument if you want to examine the players, and I'll link it in the description. I'm not a lawyer, and I haven't read every word because I don't think it's necessary. Personally, I think this has already been played out, and the cleansing of the Supreme Court is underway. The graphic you are looking at shows a timeline. Prior to 1861, our government was funded by tariffs, and the people paid no federal income tax. Then income taxes began to rise, but it was in 1913 when Congress gave themselves the ability to levy income taxes and simultaneously established the Federal Reserve that we became debt slaves. You can see that in the following period, our taxes increased by tenfold, and has pretty much remained there for the life of the Fed. The timeline is clear, and I will link a video that discusses how the U.S. government was funded by tariffs, not taxes, until Congress stepped in. Now let's look at the 6 and the 3, and I want to highlight a common denominator in the 3 that voted against this. As expected, Justices Sotomayor, Justice Elena Kagan, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, and Chief Justice John Roberts voted for these constraints on presidential authority over tariffs. Here's what you want to note, and many of you have already seen trends with these two, but Justices Amy Coney Barrett and Neil Gorsuch, both appointed by President Trump, also voted to restrict the president and overturn existing tariffs. Now here is what I want you to see. The 3 judges who voted that the taxes are allowed under this particular Foreign Emergency Act. First is Justice Kavanaugh. Remember the horror of his children hearing those baseless allegations in front of the world? Justice Clarence Thomas also voted that the tariffs qualified to be used under the act. Some of you old-timers may remember what Justice Thomas went through with the accusations of sexual harassment that Anita Hill decided to reveal at his confirmation hearing, just like Kavanaugh. Then there was Justice Samuel Alito, and while there was no accusations of impropriety at his hearing, He also experienced significant resistance by Democrats led by Obama, Kerry, and Ted Kennedy. In this case, Justice Alito was painted as a racist and accused of civil rights violations for his pro-choice stance on abortion. Alito, however, has remained a staunch conservative and voted in favor of President Trump's authority in many instances, including shadow docket cases. When asked if he regretted appointing Gorsuch and Comey Barrett, President Trump said their decisions were terrible, that of a lapdog, and that they were an embarrassment to their families. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but the companies that brought this suit were American companies who rely heavily on Asian trade. I have no evidence, but President Trump said that they are really bad people behind this, so I must note that 2 of the plaintiffs manufacture toys for children. Specifically, Learning Resources, Inc., a small manufacturer of educational toys and learning tools for children. Another is Microkits LLC, a small electronics company that teaches children to build circuits. So I don't want you to make inferences, but this is a notable data point to consider. President Trump held a press conference about the decision today. He described the decision as determining that the POTUS has the right to license entities under this act, but not to charge a license fee like every other type of license we can get. He also said many times that the court has confirmed his right to levy the tariffs, just not under the Emergency Act. While Roberts reported the decision, all of the arguments are in the linked document, but President Trump specifically said that Justice Kavanaugh wrote that this decision might not substantially constrain the levying of taxes going forward, because there are other statutes that would allow tariffs, but it's a little longer process. So in true warrior fashion, POTUS went on the attack, repeating the decision language that this doesn't prohibit the president from charging tariffs. In fact, it confirms that he can levy much stronger tariffs, and announced that, effective immediately, all national security taxes remain in place in full force under various different statutes which the Supreme Court has allowed. He also said he would be signing an executive order charging a global 10% tariff. Again, guys, this appears like a 5D chess move. Trump levied tariffs under this act. The left just overturned them. Trump is expanding taxes under other statutes, the use of which has been validated by the Supreme Court. I couldn't judge whether this was the decision expected, but it was clear that in this chess match, POTUS has many backup moves that get him all to the point of checkmate. And I'm gonna leave you with this screenshot of a video posted by Il Donaldo Trumpo, which is linked in the description. The video shows Trump leading Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Justice Brett Kavanaugh walking behind him as the Supreme Court building is exploding. So what do you think? Was this a lose for Trump, or was it part of the plan? Stay tuned because I'm sure there's more to come on this one.